JD Vance recently went viral for promoting child tax credits. Vance's remarks set off a spirited debate on the Christian right about whether or not this is a form of right-wing socialism. On this episode of Forge and Anvil, I will be joined by Waterboy Gabe Rench and Boniface Option Andrew Isker to discuss both sides and seek some clarity on how the right should view these policies. All this and more, so stick around. Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. I am a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ Jesus, doing my best to represent him well wherever I go. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm joined by two guests tonight, the first of which is Waterboy, Gabe Rench. So, Gabe, go ahead and introduce yourself to those who may not yet be familiar.
Thanks for having me, Connor. I'm Gabe Rench, host of Cross Politic. I serve as a deacon at King's Cross here in Moscow and have a wife and 3 kids, and I coach their basketball teams.
Awesome. And also joined by Andrew Isker. So, Andrew, go ahead and do the same.
Yes, hello. I'm Andrew Isker. I'm pastor of 4th Street Evangelical Church in Waseca, Minnesota. Soon I'll be in Tennessee. And at a church yet to be named in Tennessee in probably two months soon. And yeah, I also do a podcast. That's what we all do. We just do podcasts, man. Mine is with CJ Engel. It's called Contramundum, and I also post on X. Some of you probably follow me there. So that's who I am. And I've got 6 kids, so twice as many as Gabe. So I should just win this by default. But no, they're all too little to play basketball though. So I don't do any coaching. But Gabe, like Tim Walz, is a coach.
Yep. And what was ironic about this is Andrew's part of Commies for Evangelicals, or Evangelicals for Kamala Harris. He ghost wrote the David French article.
Yeah, that's right. Totally, man. You know me.
Awesome. Well, now that we've got our very accurate introductions out of the way, feel free for you listeners, if you haven't already checked out our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com. That is where I host the show. You can find all the episodes there and occasionally some additional writings. And go ahead and follow me at Forge and A on Twitter. Really appreciate it. I'll keep the rest of the intros short. We'll just dive straight in. So I wanted to host this conversation because, like I said in the intro, JD Vance was talking all about child tax credits. He was specifically talking about boosting the tax credits from $2,000 to $5,000 under the Trump-Vance administration should they win the election. Gabe, you were one of the first ones that I saw that kind of responded to the news of JD Vance wanting to boost those credits, and you had posted on Twitter that this is just another form of socialism. So obviously a lot more was said on your platform. I know Toby chimed in as well, and obviously Andrew has responded to that. But let's go ahead and just kind of reframe for our discussion here. What did you mean by your initial response when you said it's another form of socialism?
Yeah, I mean, I would say most of our tax structure is some form of socialism. I don't think Andrew would disagree with me about that at all.
So far, so good. Yeah.
Yeah. And socialism is basically, some form of redistribution of wealth, some form of the government is trying to get in between goods and services. And so our every kind of tax incentive at some level or another is some form of redistribution of wealth. People are going to, I know people on the show or in the comment section are going to say something to the effect that, well, you're misunderstanding the child tax credit. And I know Andrew's side, he's like, well, if this incentivizes good family, familiar structure and behavior, then we should be for it. And what I want to argue is that we need to be honest with what's happening And I use the child tax credit. I mean, you almost can't. In the same way, like
exactly. Yeah.
when the COVID stimulus check came into my bank account, like I couldn't not use it. It just came into my bank account. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
And so, but I want us to be accurate describing what's going on. And at the same time, we need to be wise about what programs we participate in and what we don't, kind of thing as Christians. Some of them are just shoved down our throats, and some of them we actually can proactively participate in a socialist kind of system that our government's created around us. So that was kind of my main point. My main point, I wasn't even arguing that I was not taking it. I was just saying, like, hey, this is just socialism, and we need to call it what it is. So that was kind of the main point of my tweet.
Right, and for anyone who's about to call Gabe a hypocrite because he says he's not against using it, you can go ahead and return the money from your stimulus.
That's right.
You know,
no doubt.
we all know that you didn't. So, you know, so this isn't by no means a formal debate, but I know Andrew, you had some initial responses. So I'm mostly just here to facilitate the discussion, and I'll ask maybe a couple of clarifying questions. But I'd love for you to kind of give the initial response, Andrew, and feel free to rehash anything that you've already said on Twitter, and feel free to have as much back and forth as you want, guys. And I'm just going to kind of listen and probe here and there.
Yeah, and Andrew, say something mean so we turn this in like WWF.
Yes. If we can get this to go viral, my small channel would really appreciate it. So.
Well, I'm probably going to fail you there because I just, I'm not going to, I mean, I could be mean to people I don't like, but that's going to be hard with Gabe, man. So, I'm not going to be mean to you. No, I think the issue, it's an interesting issue because it's one of those things where I don't think that Gabe and I, in principle, really disagree at all. I mean, maybe we would quibble with like, okay, how strictly do we define, socialism, things like that. Maybe there'd be disagreement there, but I think in principle, right, the way I view it, right, ideally, right, if I just have the blank slate, right, I'm designing how our society, how our economic system, how our political system, everything would function, right? Would we have stuff like this? Absolutely not. Of course not. Right. I think it's wrong. We shouldn't have, right. Well, just for starters, and I think Gabe and I probably both agree with this. Like, we shouldn't even have an income tax to begin with. Right. So that's like the first thing, right? In principle, I think we're agreed that I don't want, public money going to all sorts of different people for whatever reason. Right. I want less of that in general. I don't want that going on, period. But the second consideration, maybe even more primary, is that politics is this I'm going to start sounding like Kamala Harris, right? Politics is this thing, right? But
democracy.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I'm not going to talk to you guys like you're kindergartners, right? But the political, right? It's something that always exists, right? The question of the political and political conflict always will be existent, and within our our particular context, right, we don't have the luxury of being able to say, all right, here's the ideal, this is what we want, and we have to follow this ideal, and in the ideal, which in 500 years or 1,000 years we can get there, we can get this thing that we want, right? We're at where we are right now, not where we ought to be, and the question always is, how do we get to the place where we want to be? And one of the issues that I see is, right, if this were like 1990, right, and 34 years ago, which makes me feel really old, right? Yeah. I remember 1990. I was a little kid, but if it was 34 years ago, I'd see something like this. And I would be like, this is socialism. We should be opposed to this entirely and completely. Like, this shouldn't happen. Like, a Republican candidate should never say this. I would have the same, like the exact same attitude. But I look at it today and like right now we are at a point where like the American empire is dying and we are at the looting of the treasury stage of political existence in America. And our enemies have power over everything, right? Every single last thing. And it's the kind of political conflict where, right, liberalism is supposed to resolve political conflict. It's supposed to like bring it in house, and you have reasonable, rational debates between various parties, and you all come to an accord at the end and have this agreement. Well, we're past this stage in liberalism where now it's devolved to friend and enemy entirely, and our enemies, right, have total control over everything, and they're extremely good and extremely, because they think in these terms, and we don't usually. They think about things in friend and enemy, and they are rewarding their friends constantly. So, like right now, in the last the last year, right, there was I'm sure you guys all saw the report, right? There was $500 billion, $500 billion that went to illegal immigrants just for housing. Right, just to house illegal immigrants for like $500 trillion. Like that's more than went to Ukraine, right? It is
trillion or billion?
500 billion, $500 billion,
okay,
$500 billion. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Insane amount of money. And then, I mean, on top of that, all the other things that nobody would quibble about them being socialism, right? All of the welfare spending, which is trillions of dollars, is poured out, and it's poured out in terms of patronage, right? The people that receive those, so-called benefits, right? They are patronized by the political class in order to gain support, in order to have them as friends on their side. And the enemy of the political class is, right, normal families, married mom and dad with a bunch of kids, right? Though they know how those people vote too. Right, they see them as enemies, and they also see them as tax cattle, right, to subsidize all their friends, and so in the stage we're at politically, I view it in these terms, where I don't want to be handcuffed by what I see as the ideal that I think we're all agreed on, right? We shouldn't have any of these things, but if I'm handcuffed by the ideal of, nope, we can't do this, we can't take Caesar's money, right? All of those kind of things, then we will lose, right? Our enemies will benefit. They will get all the money. We will be impoverished. Our children will be impoverished, and our side, just politically, in just strict like political electoral terms, will be harmed greatly. And so I view it in terms of like strategy, in terms of like, military strategy even, right? What are the things that is going to, gain power for my side, my friends, gaining political power and squashing our enemies, right? What's going to advance that goal, right? I view it in those terms, right? The goal is we get political power, and then we tear down all the things that we hate, and we construct the things that we think are good. And that's how I view questions like these, not in like the strict ideological sense necessarily, even though, right, in ceteris paribus, all things being equal, yeah, I don't want income tax, don't want tax credits, don't want any of these things, but of course all things are not equal, right? We're in a particular context where we have to think politically about these questions in terms of how do we defeat our enemies, right, here and now. And long term, we can, once you win, right, the precondition to dealing with the socialism of the United States government is winning, right? That's the precondition, and we have to win first, and winning entails you know, benefiting our friends and harming our enemies, right? So if JD Vance wins, right, and he benefits all our friends, and all our friends don't have to pay taxes, and the childless cat ladies do, right? That's a good outcome, right? Even if, you know, a small fraction of people, they might get a, you know, tiny payment in excess of their tax burden, right? Which sometimes happens with the child tax credit, right? I'm okay with that within the particular situation, but not universally, right? If that makes sense, right? Universally, no, of course not. But within the particular, yeah, I think we got to win, right? I liken it to, you know, kind of the same, right? When like, you know, you guys on Cross Politic or Doug in Moscow, you know, talk about abortion and the abortion issue. I think you have the right strategy where it's like, right, we got to take wins where we can, but we always are looking toward the goal. The goal is eradicating this entirely. But we're going to have to, it's going to be a long process of stacking up win after win after win, right? And it's like you know, Smashmouth Incrementalism is the phrase Doug uses. I think he's absolutely right. And I think in the economic sphere, it has to be the same thing, and the political sphere in general, right? We have to have win after win after win, and then we can tear down the horrible things that we hate and get rid of them entirely, right? And so,
Andrew, can I chime in here?
Yeah. Interrupt me whenever, man. You go, you know.
Sure. Yeah. So I obviously think, you know, Smashmouth Incrementalism, I have no problem with trying to be strategic, which is what Smashmouth Incrementalism is, you know, especially in our state like Idaho. We got a massive voting box Mormon. So we're just about never going to get rid of the rape, incest exceptions and the health of the mother because of the massive Mormon voting population.
Until you convert all the Mormons.
Exactly. But that kind of is going to get to my point where I don't want to buy into their Machiavellian power structures and say it's all about winning. And, you know, I was talking to my friend Nate last week, and one of the ways he was talking about in you know, kind of fighting the abortion war in our current climate was have a state, and I've actually talked to a couple states about this, have a state put forward an anti-genocide bill where white doctors couldn't kill black babies. So then
That's pretty good.
Then you get the argument, like, no, we want white doctors to kill black babies.
Yeah.
Right?
They'd have to argue that.
They'd have to, you know, it puts them in a very weird situation. No, you don't understand. We want white doctors to be able to kill black babies. But what we're actively pushing back is kind of buying into their Machiavellian power structures. And the same
you use
thing,
it against them.
Well, we're using really rhetoric against them. We're using their slippery slope, their you know, the reductio, all that stuff against them. And in the same way, so here's my big concern with Christians kind of buying into, you know, some sort of, let's say, tax winning strategy. I don't know if you'd kind of call it that, Andrew, but something along those lines. Some sort of winning tax strategy for conservatives and families and Christian families and all that stuff. Is that and this plays right into the whole ESA or school choice stuff that's happening around the country. There's been examples of that happening in other countries where conservatives are like, hey, we want school choice, they get school choice, and then 20 years down the road it ends up making things 10 times worse. That's what happened in Canada. Something like 25 years ago, 30 years ago, had a big fight over homeschool. And so the state just turned around and said, okay, school choice, basically. They didn't call it that back then. School choice. And now all this school choice money goes to the private schools and Christian schools. And that's how Canada now regulates the Christian schools, is through that school choice money. And now Christians are kind of stuck. They want the money. And now they get the regulations that they don't want, but they're jammed. In the same way, so you brought up the is and ought. And I think we constantly need to be talking about the ought because that's our target. We don't have a target to hit. We ain't going to hit it, right? And so we have to talk about the ought and in relationship to what is right now, what's the best way to proceed. And so
Mhm.
part of what I want to get at is like, hey, let's just be frank on what this is.
Mhm.
Yeah, Christians, you're kind of stuck. You're kind of working. You have to work in this framework right now. But we got to start. We got to let every Christian know this is what it is. Because Andrew, me and you are a little more thoughtful about what's happening in our taxation system, right? Most Christians, when
Don't
I
give any
said
thought
that,
to it at all. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we want to disciple and
Mm.
and which is what winning is. That's the play. That's the
Yeah.
playbook God
Yeah.
gave us, was to disciple, right? And so that would
Yeah.
be kind of, I know you aren't disagreeing, but that'd be kind of my
Yeah.
pushback, I think, to
I
kind
get
of
I get
the
that.
power
Yeah.
structure Machiavellian language.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think the issue, I mean, yeah, take the issue of Canada and school choice, for example. And I think this is one of the issues that plagues a lot of conservatism and conservative political action is you'll have people that they care about their like one issue, and that's the only thing they care about. So if they care about school choice and homeschooling, things like that, and they get a win on that, and then it's like, all right, good, we're done. We got the thing we wanted. That's it. And they nevertheless, like they fail to think politically in terms of right the cohesive whole. Where I mean, what happened in Canada, right? Isn't that they got this thing, they got their hooks in them, and then they pulled the old switcheroo, right? I mean, it is what happened. But what actually happened is, right, they lost, right? They lost Canada, and then right the left in Canada takes total power. I mean, if you look at Canadian politics, maybe there's Canadians watching this and they can comment in the chat on the stream. But the left, I mean, it's like Canada is kind of a picture, and like Great Britain and a lot of Europe is a picture of what could happen and can happen to the United States, especially if Kamala Harris wins and they're able to pass the things they want to do. Is right. What they do with power is they get power and then they use power to get more power, right? Consistently, constantly,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So and that's what they did in Canada. So to the point where like the Conservative Party in Canada is a joke, right? I mean, we criticize the GOP here, right, and rightfully so. But the Conservative Party in Canada is like 1,000 times worse than the GOP, 1,000 times weaker and more ineffectual. And so, right, the issue in Canada isn't so much that they did this thing and then they get their hooks in them and then they pull the old switcheroo and now they're stuck between a rock and a hard place with the state and the regulations and so forth. It's that they got the thing they wanted, then they didn't do anything else and they lost, right? They didn't continue to acquire power to defeat their enemies. And so what I'm saying with things like this, or even things like, like Florida and school choice and all these various states that are adopting school choice and vouchers and tax credits for school choice and for homeschool families, private school families. I look at that, I mean, in the same way, right? In the same way. And yeah, there is the concern that, right, you adopt these things and then you lose, and then now they've got you where they want you, and you're hooked to the money, and you can't you can't get out of it. What you have to do is use these things like school choice, perfect example, because one of the most powerful entities, one of the most powerful unions, one of the most powerful institutions in the United States, and Gabe knows as well, is the public schools and the teacher union. Right. I mean, they, like in my state, right, Tim Walz is the governor of my state because the teacher union, Education Minnesota, right, the NEA branch in Minnesota got him elected as governor. Right. That's why, like 100% why. And that's why he's the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats. Right. Because of the NEA, because of teachers unions. And so, like, you think about things politically, right, from political strategy perspective, right, what do you got to do, right? You need to smash those unions. You need to take away their power. How do you take away their power? You take away their money. And so you pull kids out of public schools where they're making just boatloads of money, insane amounts of money. I mean, again, you want to talk about socialism, right? if you smash those things and you continue to use that as a lever to win, rather than just say, all right, we got school choice, we can put our feet up and we're done now. But it's like, okay, we got school choice. Now on to the next target. Now what other group do we need to smash and take away their stuff and benefit, take their loot, give it to our friends, and destroy our enemies, right? That's the kind of political thing that you have to operate within this context, because it's not right. It's not 1787 where we're constructing like a new government and the bulk of the population is Christian and just revolted over a small tax on tea, right? You instead, right, have a nation that has been discipled by free stuff for well over 100 years now, and it's not such an easily extricable situation. And you have a nation where, I mean, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, trillions of dollars of money that just gets thrown out for people that hate us, and so
give them more through tax credits.
No, you're not. No, I don't think you're giving them more, because most of the people that are going to benefit, and this is why Vance says this, because right, most of the people that are going to benefit.
Let's be honest. Let's say Kamala said this.
Yeah, Kamala. Well, she did, right? She did.
She totally did.
But if you notice what she said, it's like first year it's going to be 6,000, and then
did she say? I didn't say that.
Yeah,
she just wanted to up. She's like trying to up the ante with JD Vance. We're having a fight over who can be the best socialist in America.
Well, so I want to jump in because I have kind of a question for each of you that kind of just relates exactly to this. So Andrew, I guess my question for you is, how do we keep the rewards from escalating? Because that's exactly what happened. Vance said 5,000 is going to be the new child tax credit, and Kamala immediately comes out 6,000. So we can continue to do this, but then simultaneously, simultaneously, Gabe, if we never propose these policies that reward our friends, we live in the total state. We live in something that's closer to a democracy than the republic, just with how much of our constitutional norms have been eroded. So can we ever gain power without playing this game while operating in the total state in order to reverse some of these things? So that's kind of a question to both of you.
Yeah. So that goes back to the kind of Machiavellian power structures. I don't want to play in their game. I don't want to sit here and say, I'll give you 5. And then Kamala says 6. And okay, 7,500, kind of thing.
I'll take
sold.
I'll take it.
Sold, right? What I want to do, for example, let's go back to the school choice bills. The Republicans could there's actually some school choice bills that are really good that they could pitch that would blow people's minds. For example, this is one I've been trying to push in my state. The school choice bill I'm comfortable with is in the state of Idaho. Every state's just a little different. In the state of Idaho, 50% of your property taxes go towards the public schools. So the school choice bill I'm pitching is, why don't you just let families who opt out of the government system to keep 50% that money from their property that would go to the public school? That does 2 things. For one, it stops the stupid recycling of money. The money goes to the state, and the state then benevolently returns it back to you. And you just keep it. You just keep that 50%. Secondly, it starts to chip away at property taxes. Like, that's a school choice bill that is, you're getting rid of the socialism, and you're chipping away at a gold mine for public schools that they don't want to see. They want their hands all over that. Even if school choice flies, they would the last thing that they would ever want to see is like, getting rid of property taxes. That would drive them crazy. So that's the kind of strategic where it's like you're getting rid of socialism, and it's whatever it's called, school choice bill, but it really what it is like keep your property taxes bill, and you can use it to spend on your education. The funny thing about that bill, and that bill is probably going to be the most, if I ever get it proposed down in Boise, that bill will be the most hated bill. And what's hilarious about it, let's say my property taxes here in Idaho are probably around $300 a month, what I'm paying on my house. And so I'd get to keep 50% of that, which would be $150 a month. $150 times 12 ends up being, something like $2,000 a month ish. Most school choice bills that are proposed in Idaho have been around the $5,500 to $6,500 mark. And so it's not even that much money, but it'd be the most hated bill because it's actually what should be proposed, and it's actually in Idaho what should fly. So you really want to do damage to the system. It's like, let's think strategically about this.
Yeah, what's the per pupil spending, from state taxes in Idaho for, like how much, how much they spend per kid in the school?
Well, I know in my county, I don't know the average, but my county is something around $10,000 per pupil. Yeah. I think it might even be $11,000 per pupil, which is insane. Yeah. Logos, my school is like $6,000 per pupil.
Yeah, it's even more in Minnesota, but yeah.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah. Oh, DC, it's like $27,000 per pupil.
It's insane. It's insane. Yeah. Right. And so, I think about that, but you still run into the same issues, even with that bill, where it's like, oh, well, actually we decided that now we need to regulate the homeschools and the private Christian schools in order for you to qualify for that property tax incentive. Right. So you still, no matter how you shake it, I think this kind of goes to Connor's point where we live in a managerial state where it isn't even so much democracy would be bad enough, right? It's actually much worse than that. It's worse than democracy, where the state, like the state of Idaho, state of Minnesota, right, state of Tennessee, is all run by managers, right? So you have the Idaho Department of Education, and they're the ones that set all the policy. They're the ones that tell the Idaho legislature, how much should we spend this year on the public schools? And then they either rubber stamp it or they argue about it and only raise the amount of spending by, half or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. It always goes up, right? But
never gets more efficient.
No, never. And so the institutions, there's like this institutional inertia that exists within a managerial state, and it isn't. These institutions exist, and there is no reforming them. There's no fixing them. There is no making them more efficient. And instead, right, the only thing you can do is go to war with them and try to destroy them. And you have to be thinking about, right, what is the most effective means to go about destroying them and wielding power to do that. And so, if your state did pass one of those ones where it's like, we're going to take the full per pupil spending for every kid, and that goes to the parents, and they can do whatever they. Even like you look at Florida, right? You hear some of these like anecdotes about the Florida voucher system and things like that, where like welfare queen moms, just take their kids out to homeschool them, and what they do is they just buy a season pass to Disney and take them to Disney World every day. And I look at that and I think, me from like Gabe remembers how I was when I lived in Moscow from 2011 to 2014. I was like Mr. Libertarian, big Ron Paul guy and all that kind of stuff. You would have told me that in like 2013, right? That was going to be happening in Florida and that kind of waste was going on. I would have been apoplectic. I would have been like, this is awful, right? Somebody's got to do something about this, right? You tell me that now, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't really care. Because, right, the Florida Department of Education doesn't get that money, and that kid going to, ride Splash Mountain. Oh, they don't have Splash Mountain anymore because it's racist. But the kid riding Space Mountain, right, he's probably getting a better education standing in line at Disney World than he is in the public school, right? So in every sense, it's a win-win, right? Even though that money's getting wasted and it's being stolen from people's taxes and everything else is horrible. I hate it. Again, like ceteris paribus, all things being equal, it's awful. I hate it. It's terrible. But within the context of the political conflict that we're in, where I want these institutions to be destroyed, I don't think that the possibility of them being reformed exists. They have to go down. And in the same way with the child tax credit and things like this, it's an issue where, I look at our political situation much less like it's 1980 or 1990, where there's still time to right the ship and fix everything. I look at America like it's, right, 1916 in Russia or 1935 in Spain, where, all right, like we have very dark days ahead. We're very, very evil stuff is going to happen. I mean, I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff Kamala said, and she's not been saying much other than the same speech over and over again. But there was this one where she's like, "Right, we're just going to take their patents. We're just going to take them," and things like that. Crazy. Where she's talking like a communist revolutionary, and like my governor literally is one. Like he's a Maoist, right? There are all these people talking about how when he went to China, how much he loved Mao Zedong and the Chinese system. And isn't it so wonderful that they're all equal and everybody gets a pound of rice a day? And isn't it so great? It's this utopia, right? That's what that guy wants for our country. And how do you get that? Right? Millions dead is how you get that, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, people think maybe I'm being hysterical or histrionic using this kind of language about the threat that is before us. Like, especially when I like get into arguments with abolitionists, you know, I mean, so many people don't want to see what is going to happen soon, right? It isn't just simply, right, oh, I'm a Republican, the Democrats the other team. It's like watching a football game between the Vikings and over there's the Packers, and I don't like them, but at the end of the day, it's just a football game, and we all go home and have fun, right? It's like, no, this is life and death, right? This is, right, these people take power, and they take complete and total power, and that means, you know, people like me go to prison, right? People like me, like my family starve, right, if these people take power. And so I look at it where the kind of things where I would be like, no, we can't do that. That's socialist. We can't do that. We're using Caesar's money, right? We can't do these things because it violates, you know, my libertarian principles. I'm like, I don't care at all anymore about any of these things. Our side has to win. We have to defeat the bad guys, and we have to defeat them by any means necessary. Right. That's the attitude I think we have to have right within political conflict where, and sometimes people hear that and you're like, well, you're Christian, you mean that there's nothing that's immoral in this? It's like, no, it's a difference between, right. And that's not what I'm saying. So people hear that, you know, if somebody clips it and takes me out of context, you know, I can provide the full context here. I'm not saying, no, there is there's no system of morality. There's no things we can do that are wicked and wrong, but rather the ideals I have, right, I can't be constrained by them in this kind of conflict, right? Because if you've read like Alinsky and Rules for Radicals, like that's what they do. They use our own ideals against us constantly, right? Where, oh, I thought, well, you're conservative, you should be against these things, so that's socialism, and it's like, yeah, I am.
Which Andrew, which is what I'm arguing against with the tax credits and stuff. Where it's like, I know. That whole system is going to be used against us, which is what happened in Canada.
I know, but I would rather make the attempt for our side to gain more power through these means than let the other side just keep gaining more power. Right? Does that make sense?
So here's I understand what you're saying there. Here's why here's where I think the real issue with our side is that our side constantly shoots at each other down the line.
Yeah,
that's the real problem. If we actually, evangelicals make up 40 million, you know, of the voting block, maybe 50 million of the voting block.
Yeah.
And what we're doing on our side is we're shooting down the line, you know, bam, bam, at our friends, and we can't even like think strategically about how to work with each other on good plays. And those good plays, someone comes up with a good play, and everyone all of a sudden's like, oh, you know, you suck. I got a better play, and so we're constantly shooting.
What if the JD Vance play is the good play, and you're shooting at him?
Well, no.
well, you know, that was one question I was going to propose is at the end of the day, Gabe, I think one of the reasons why you got lit up as much as you did on Twitter is because I think a lot of people felt like you were counter signaling at a time that was bad for counter signaling since we're moving up to a general election. So, I mean, obviously respond to what Andrew said there as well, but that was going to be one of the questions I was hoping to ask tonight is at what time do we begin counter signaling? Should we have done that previously? Are we at a point where, kind of to Andrew's point, like the runway is running out, we need to kind of coalesce? Because that's a little bit what you were already beginning to say in a way.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, the problem is you don't fight socialism. Can you guys hear that truck in the background? Is it loud?
No, you're fine.
Okay, great.
Rev it up more, man.
Yeah. I got my nephew who's like dumping firewood over here. Doesn't know I'm on the show, so
I love it.
it's okay. That engine should be gone. But you don't fight socialism with socialism. Like that's the criticism. That's the truth, and that's what I was getting at with JD Vance. Is like he's just fighting socialism with socialism. I just went down my Twitter thread and saved a couple screenshots, not actually knowing I was even going to come on Connor's show here. But
hold them up to the camera. Yeah.
This is I could do that. Yeah, let's see if I can do this. I can't do it very well, but here's a good example. Hot boomer take from a Douglas Wilson simp. That's what it means to shoot. That's crazy. Here's another take on this. Someone said, this is a good policy if only applied to American citizens and whites. Like those were the people. Those were a lot of. That wasn't all. There was actually some good natured desire for discussion stuff in my thread, but that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that we're trying to fight socialism with socialism, and then someone who proposes something like I've proposed in my state on the tax credit, the tax ESA side of things, that we can't get behind it because we think the only way to fight, and this is the Republican argument here in my state, is we got to fight socialism with socialism, which is why we got to structure our ESA. School choice bill this way, which is just more socialism. And so Republicans, their response constantly with, school choice, with tax credits, with all these things, they're just buying into that Democratic, Machiavellian power structure and saying, let's just propose, $5,000 tax credit. Let's, and instead of, I remember, Andrew, I know you'll agree with me with this. This will make you happy. George Bush, Jr. was one of the worst presidents we ever had in this nation. I'm from Texas. Like that was my
big thing for you to say. Yeah.
And he was for multiple reasons, but one of the reasons was because he thought fighting, kind of the leftist drift was with more leftist drift. He's the one that proposed No Child Left Behind, which doubled the Department of Education budget, which was the mechanism and money that introduced DEI in trans bathrooms into the public school system.
100%.
And so we're just going to rinse and repeat all over again if we just constantly keep proposing, new and tamer socialistic policies.
Yeah, I think I would maybe disagree with you can't fight. Well, I wouldn't even characterize it necessarily that way. But you can't fight socialism with your own government spending or whatever, however you want to phrase it. Because what you can't fight it with is just this universalist. We're just going to hand out free chocolate milk for everybody all the time for everything, right? I don't think that works either. But I think things like this, where
it's just free chocolate milk for some and not for others.
Precisely. Yeah. For friends and not for enemies. Right. I think if you turn it, you frame it this way, where if George W. Bush had proposed an education bill like No Child Left Behind, and it ended up benefiting, the people that vote for him, right, his constituency, and it ended up harming the people that hated him and hated his constituency, vote against him, right? I think we'd be in a much better place, right? So if it would have done things like, if it would have done things where, we'll give all this money to the public schools, but we're not going to allow you to have teachers unions anymore, right? If that was the quid pro quo, right, with No Child Left Behind, which is again huge disaster, huge mess, a total waste. I hate it, right? But I'm thinking in like political terms, right? if he said, yeah, we have to abolish the NEA and then you can have these trillions of dollars, right? I've been like, I don't really like spending trillions of dollars, but if the choice is between spending trillions of dollars and it benefits the people that hate me, or spending trillions of dollars and it harms them, if those are our two choices, right? Not a world where we get, any possible choice where we have our ideal, which is not doing it at all, and abolishing the Department of Education, right? If that's not on the table, and those two things are, right, I'll take the thing that abolishes the teachers' unions every single time, right?
But Andrew, every economic policy has a reaction, right?
Mhm.
And that what would have happened there, with your proposal, you would have just created an organic NEA nationwide all the way through to the homeschoolers. And so now what you've done is maybe the public school NEA is gone, but then an organic NEA pops up and they fight against any Republican that tries to hold any accountable to the education system.
Yeah, they already do that stuff anyway. What I'm saying,
but you just make it worse. That's what I'm saying is, so a lot of your proposals, as I'm reading it, you're like taking one devil, kicking him out of the house, cleaning up and rearranging all the furniture for 7 devils to come back in.
No, I don't think so. I'm looking at this like in terms of thinking about it politically, and how do you harm your enemies and benefit your friends instead of harming your friends and benefiting your enemies, which is what George W. Bush did, right? So in principle, yes, like in an ideal sense, right? Spending the money, always a disaster. The Medicare extension, all these things that he did are terrible. I look at it, right, because this is the thing the GOP just simply never did, is their primary constituency was the donor class, right? That's who they were interested in satisfying.
And corporate interest, which would be part of that. Sure.
Yeah, the same. Yeah. They could not care less about the actual people that vote for them, right? And this is what's so significant about Trump, is like the policies and the agenda that he has is clearly explicitly for the benefit of his voters and not the donor class, right? And that's why they hate him so much. That's why the establishment of the GOP hates him so much.
And that's where his populism kind of comes in.
Right? Yeah, because no one has represented the GOP, the median GOP voter in decades. And so, this is why he's so wildly popular. It's not that there's some kind of cult or things like that. It's that, right, here's a guy that's actually doing the things well. Like, I remember, when he gave his first speech and he said, Mexico is bringing rapists and murderers and drug dealers and some, I assume, are good people. Like, he says that. It's like, I've heard that from every Republican voter that I've been around, that I worked with on job sites and things like that my entire life. And I never heard that from a Republican politician ever. And it was like, whoa, he said the thing, right? And so many of these things, right? Talking about how this phony free trade, right, just destroyed the American economy and benefited foreign countries massively and harmed our country in very tangible ways. And like things like that, right? Well, yeah, benefits giant corporations, right? It benefit, but it doesn't benefit Americans. And the same thing with immigration, right? Importing tens of millions of people, right? That'll benefit corporations because the labor costs will go down, but it doesn't benefit Americans, right? And so, all these kinds of things, right? It's so much that, right, his political instincts are, right, what helps my people and what harms the people that are against me. And I look at it in those terms. Like, we have to think about it in those terms, and not in, right, what is the pristine, ideologically pure way to approach any issue, right? Is this socialism, or is this big government, or is this big government spending, right? Because, right, we're at the stage in the empire where it's looting the treasury, right? the reason we have this massive inflation
for a while.
Yeah, well, it's been there for a while, but now, it's reached its zenith, right? We're at a fever pitch now where, my entire life, there was always some inflation where things slowly cost more than they did 5 or 10 years ago. You kind of notice that. But now, right, you notice it year over year, right, or even month over month, right, on everything, not just like, oh yeah, beef's a little high now, right? Must be something. Maybe they had a bad year, right, raising cattle, and so beef is costing a little more than it used to, and then it kind of goes back to normal, right? Now it's just everything, every single thing costs way more, and you notice it's so palpably obvious that even Kamala is talking about it. And then, of course, they just say, well, if corporations decided to all raise their prices together, it's price gouging. Just like, which tells, I mean, that alone, I mean, this is a tangent, but like, right, tells you where we're at politically.
Someone needs to write an article on why price gouging is a blessing.
Yeah, you didn't you? Did you write that?
I didn't write it, but someone needs to.
No, I thought I saw somebody write something recently about that, but it's true. That no, it's not. No one's gouging prices. It's not all these corporations just decide to raise their prices. Like, and anybody believes that is really, really stupid, right? They're really dumb, and they should not be allowed to vote.
Same thing for tariffs.
I don't know. I used to think that. Now this is good. This is a good debate. It's a good discussion.
Tariffs is true price gouging.
Well, look, comment some more on that, Gabe. We'll see where we disagree.
Well, I mean, tariffs. If let's say we put tariffs on China, I mean, China pays the tariffs, but they turn around and jack up their prices for American citizens. I mean, it's just the citizens. The buyer is the one who suffers from the tariff, not the country.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Well,
if China puts tariffs on us, it's always the people.
Yeah.
It's always the person who's actually exchanging their dollar for that good that gets hurt.
Yeah. I think you're right in theory, yes.
In reality,
well, yes, but some of the issue is that it isn't actually like, I mean, like globalism just in general is absurd, right? It's just this total absurdity that it is better for us to have all of our manufactured goods made literally on the other side of the planet, right?
It's insane.
That's insane.
How does it make sense that a boat thousands of miles away can bring goods to our country and charge less than what our country can manufacture for? That's crazy.
It shouldn't be able to. It shouldn't be able to. And the reason,
because this is where we agree, and the reason is because our government has made the cost of production so difficult and so high through legislation, through minimum wage, through taxation, through all this,
on our own domestic side, yes, and then on the foreign side, the dirty little secret is that the Chinese, they pay almost nothing in labor, and they're able to do that because they subsidize the livelihoods of all their people, and they also subsidize these industries, right? So they're pumping trillions of dollars into the manufacturing sphere, and the United States can't compete with that. So all of our industry gets exported over there,
and because the United States can't compete with that because we've legislated our businesses to death. No. So imagine a situation where we just deregulated the manufacturing economy, and China is we're the one propping up China's economy. We're the ones propping up China's subsidies of slave labor, of and
part of it too,
them propping up manufacturing companies over in China and so forth through all their incentives.
Well, it's American corporations that benefit from it massively, because they're taking the subsidy from the Chinese ultimately, and so that's right. That's why
they don't see that the cost of goods are higher. They actually, if we did it me and Andrew's way, the cost of goods would drop significantly in the U.S. and we would be building our own, DVD players. Do we have DVD players anymore?
Not anymore.
We build our
streaming now.
We build our own streaming devices.
There's that boomer take, man.
That's right.
Oh man,
maybe he was right.
I was gonna say beta, or laser disc, but I held back from that.
We're old. But no, I know. But again, like even this question is right. Which is easier to do? Right, if you're the president of the United States, right? Because this is we all have, and I think we're in agreement on like what
it would be so easy to eliminate corporate taxes nationwide. That's actually easy, but they won't do it.
Then it's not easy. That's the issue, right? It's not easy if
they don't do it because they're bought into this Machiavellian power play.
Well,
that's why it's not easy. It's easy.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Andrew.
I don't think it's simply that like they're bought into it. It's that once the structures exist within the system, right, it's very difficult to roll these things back and reform it. And so, right, I don't.
Well, if you're bought into it, yeah, it's difficult. But that's what I'm saying is like, don't buy into it, Andrew. And,
I understand that, but
common sense bills and legislation that you can put forward that everyone would be like, oh yeah, we're doing that.
So
100%.
Yeah, the problem is we don't have 435 Thomas Masseys in the Congress, and I wish that we did, but we're never going to have that under the current circumstances, and so
because they're all bought into the Machiavellian power structure, except for Massey and a few.
Yeah, and so how do you
get them out of that?
Well, and how do you do that is the question. Right. I don't think
by discipleship. The power play for the church is discipleship. That's the power play.
I'm talking about like that's a question of hundreds of years, right? Process. And I'm trying to think through
not necessarily
politics. Yeah, I'm trying to think through politics right in the current day within the options that are on the table that are available. And so like the issue of tariffs, right? That's something that a president can do very easily.
And hurt his people further.
Marginally, it would, but it also hurts your enemies even more, right? So that's always the question. It's like,
they pass off the cost. They pass off the cost.
I don't think they do because the Chinese do not want it, right? I mean, like when Trump was in office, and I mean maybe we can go.
They raised their prices. If we gave them tariffs, they'd run the calculations and raise the prices off those tariffs.
What I'm saying is like it massively affected their economy. Like it hurt them badly. And like we could put our tinfoil hats on and ask, well, why did this weird, disease appear in China? Right. And it's like, I don't know. But there was the trade war was being won by the United States versus China, and it was harming them. And it was good for our country. It was good for industry in the United States, like real, actual manufactured goods, where instead of just producing financial goods, which is what our economy is based on, rather having actual tangible goods, real productivity here in the United States is a huge benefit, and it really harms the corporations that exist to financialize everything, right? They're making money counting beans, right, rather than building stuff. And
so, but what happens let's give your argument. Let's say it hurts China. But that's just a temporary pain in a long-term game that the tariff system's gonna win, and only end up in the long term, in the long run, hurting the flyover America, because they're the ones who actually pay for those goods.
Then they also have jobs that pay the bills too, where that didn't exist prior, right? And so, no, the people at
because what happens is we raise tariffs on China, and then we just go to Taiwan because now we don't have tariffs in Taiwan, so now it's more feasible to buy from Taiwan. It doesn't fix the problem in America.
Maybe. Well, yes and no. I mean, Taiwan.
No, that's what happened with the CHIPS bill.
Well, yeah,
that's what happens with the semiconductor bill. Taiwan, won big time on that.
A lot of money on that. Yeah.
Yeah. She did. Yeah.
But no, with the chips is one issue, but I mean, like the manufacturing economy as a whole. Right, it did massive damage to China, and the people on Wall Street who, right, they make their bones.
But if it does massive damage to China, it's only temporary. That's what I'm saying. It's temporary.
Well, yes and no.
Because Intel gets the chip bill, and then a year or two later, they fired 15,000 employees from Intel.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're all short term. They're wanting that big money at the beginning, but it only ends up hurting Americans in the long term.
No, it does. I mean, there are examples of that for sure. But what I'm saying in the macro level, right, the bigger picture, where if you repatriate industry to the United States, and it's here now, and things are being built and constructed, and it's more profitable to build them in the United States and employ Americans doing those jobs, right? That benefits us more than, right, computer money being made in Wall Street because, you know, a bunch of Chinese guys for a couple dollars an hour are making widgets, you know, over in Wuhan, right? Like that is the issue. And so, like, if you, again, it's always the question of, right, who is it harming? It's harming China. It's harming certain interests on Wall Street that benefit from globalism, and it benefits the American people, right? And so, looking at the immediate political problems that way, where
it doesn't benefit the American people.
I think it does. Like, because the question is, right, does it benefit me more, and you and all of us? Does it benefit us more for, you know, strong industry here in the United States versus it being in China, and I can get my TV for $50 less, right? It's going to be $50 more for me to buy it here, right? Who's benefiting from that, right? I think my country is, right, because if my people have good jobs and are making money, and a foreign country that hates us is not, right, that's good. And of course it's not ideal, but I mean, even the very beginning of the United States, right, how was the United States federal government funded, right? There was no income tax. There were no sales tax. There were very small excise taxes on whiskey and so forth, right? But the overwhelming majority of the United States,
not in Kentucky though,
was that's right, was
it's like 40%
tariffs.
in Kentucky.
It was tariffs, right? It was foreign goods, and I mean we had a huge war over this issue, right? Because the tariffs got way too high. But right, that's how it was financed, was through the tariff issue, and I look at it and I think, okay, well, that's not perfect, right? Somehow,
but the tariffs were used in the Civil War to kill the Southern economy.
Oh yeah, that's the, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the reason the war is fought.
Yep.
Yeah, ultimately.
Which is, again, tariffs are not good in the long run.
Yeah, well, you look at even that one, like, people will clip that and take that out of context. It's like, well, right, the decision.
They're going to say we're racist for
the decision to resupply. Yeah, the decision to resupply Fort Sumter was reached, right, not after secession, not after the formation of the Confederacy. It was reached after the Confederate States passed a tariff bill with zero tariffs, right? Mm-hmm. That's when Lincoln's cabinet said, "Yep, let's go ahead and do it." And it's like, that's what the war was provoked over. Not, you know, even though obviously, right, the issue of slavery was a major one, of course, but it was an economic war as well. But even that, like, we look at the founding of America and, right, the genius of these men and how they devised a government and so forth. Right. What did they choose to do? Because they could have chosen an income tax. They could have chosen a poll tax or a head tax. I mean, there's millennia of history of taxation for them to draw upon, and they chose tariffs. Right. And so I would rather have 40% tariff, or, you know, a 35% tariff than a 35% income tax. Right. Because I don't have to buy stuff from overseas, but I have to work. I have to make an income, right? So if I have to choose between the lesser of two evils, I'm going to choose that one every time, right? But again, like, the issue of these things ultimately is, right, I want to look at politics in the near term and even in the long term, right? But in the near term, I want policies that are chosen that are going to harm the other side and benefit our side. And the long term, the ultimate long term implication of that has to be, we can't even be thinking, well, what's going to happen 40 years from now if we institute this policy and get used to it and everything else, right? It has to be, right, the long term is we have to win, right? The left has to be completely crushed. The managerial state has to be destroyed and demolished completely. And what
Agreed.
things have to be done to get to that point, right? What things are going to move the ball forward down the field? And I'm not gonna say, wow, we can't, JD Vance, we can't do that because that's I don't like that ideologically. Got some problems with it. It's like, well, is this gonna help us win? Do it, and then smash everything up into bits.
And that's really
Connor,
a lot of
I got about 10 minutes left. Just FYI.
It's getting dark there.
Yeah,
it's
getting dark, and I got to put my kids to bed.
I think this will kind of help bring us home. So, I mean, the reality is what you're kind of saying, Andrew, is that because we live in, we talked about it throughout the conversation. We essentially live in a democracy. At the end of the day, Gabe, I guess my concern is with what you're saying. I think you are holding up the ideal that I agree with, and I think Andrew agrees with, from what I'm understanding from this conversation. But the reality is we currently live in a situation where we live in the total state. So the question is, our ideals are, more conservative and sometimes even libertarian economically, ideals that we hold are really oftentimes for a more, it's going to sound awful to say it, but it's for a more educated voter. The more simple-minded voter is going to say, what can this person give me in the now? They're not going to think about the long-term implications. So the question is, we have to figure out how we can get to a point where we can actually get some points on the board and start taking some power back so that eventually we can reverse to the ideals. And I think your response would maybe be, and of course, I'll let you respond in just a moment here, that the church can sort of fill the gap through discipleship. But the thing that I'm noticing, and this is probably what Andrew would agree with as well, is that that is true. The church should fill that gap with discipleship, but that's going to take 10,000 men. But God's already willed our troops down to 300. So what can we do with 300? Because 300 might be able to be a organized minority that can sort of do a, for lack of a better term, Hail Mary pass. Whereas, if we had 10,000 men, our strategy would be completely different. If we had 10 years, our strategy could be completely different. I think I share Andrew's concern that we are at the end of the runway. How much time do we have left? I don't know. But the question remains, can we rely upon, the church can disciple? Well, we can't even agree on whether or not, there are shepherds for sale, while we have a whole documented case right in front of us for us to read. We're still debating that. So the church can't even, settle its differences on those things. How can we disciple this nation in the short term? I don't think we can. So we have to then look at who's actually with us and what can we do with that small number. It probably can't be discipling the whole nation to get, an extra 250 Thomas Masseys into the House of Representatives. It really has to look like, what can we do that's actually politically feasible? And I would assume that's what Andrew is more or less arguing. So feel free to pick that up.
Well, one of my central arguments in this is that a lot of the solutions that Andrew would be for would actually do more damage in the long run. There might be some, and it only feeds that short-term thinking that you just referenced. And, discipleship is not a stopgap. Discipleship is the call of the church. And,
right.
Andrew's been in Moscow and Moscow. And I said earlier in this conversation that, Andrews mentioned that it'd take, 300 years. He said some sort of number of long-term, take 300 years to really solve this problem through discipleship. And you come to Moscow and it's actually, no, it's probably about 50 years. Moscow is a microcosm kind of what's going on in the fight. You got the liberals and you got the Christians and you got this constant, the Moscow liberals here in town have Jim Crow laws for us, not for them kind of thing. It's pretty comical at this point. We just kind of laugh whenever something new happens that we have to follow, but they don't have to follow, and zoning laws or whatever you want to call it, and whatever they're trying to do with us. But discipleship, you're seeing in our town. So we're in a town of about 20,000 people. And when Doug started this whole thing, Grandpa Jim, when he started this whole thing, was in about the 70s. and Doug became a pastor, I think in like 75, 76, something like that. And here we are, you know, 2024, fast forward 2024, and we now make up about 2,000 people in this town out of 20,000. And some of those 20,000 include college students who don't vote in town. So we're about 10% of the voting block. And if you just give that another 20 years, liberals aren't having kids in town. If they do have kids, it's maybe one, maybe two kids. And then those kids grow up and don't go to college in town because it's not cool to be around their parents. Our kids are loving it here. Our kids, we have, man, I should know the numbers to this. We probably have, let's say, 800 kids under the age of 18 in our community. So out of those 2,000 people, a lot of them can't vote yet because they aren't 18. Well, it takes 2,500 to 3,500 votes to win the mayor's seat here in town. So we're getting close to the tipping point. Liberals don't even understand what's going on. That it's just a number. It's just a math problem at this point. If the church was faithful in Boise, Minneapolis, all these other towns, it would just be 40 years before they take over the voting block. Think of it also this way. Ben Zorn's my executive pastor at Christ Church when I was at Christ Church. He ran the numbers basically and said, let's say each family has four kids. I got to get in the camera. 4 kids. And those kids grow up to be faithful, get married, and have 4 kids. And then you kind of have this exponential kind of, 4-kid growth every 15 years, 20 years, every 20 years, let's say. Like 150 years, there will be about 200,000 wrenches running around Idaho. Faithful, godly, by the grace of God, covenantal generation. And then 100 years, 150 years, that kind of time frame. It takes right now about 200,000, 250,000 votes to win the governorship in the primaries. That's it. Well, I got 200,000 descendants. The Rench clan is going to run Idaho. And so the actual discipleship is the fastest way to do this, as opposed to if you give Christians all these socialistic incentives and endeavors, you're actually going to crimp that process and create longer term problems that now you have to unwind under the conservatives playing inside the Machiavellian power structures. So discipleship is actually the short run and the long run solution in all this. And Lord willing, in Idaho, I'm praying for this, and we're laboring towards this. And I know Andrew is laboring towards this with his kids and his church in Minnesota and his church in Tennessee. That looks like he's going to start. That's how you win. And so if we buy into this, their Machiavellian play and try to create incentives that might in the short run look like they're helping Christian families, in the long run, it's only going to exacerbate the problem. That's my closing. That's my closing speech.
Yeah. I see that. I grant that point. That's a good. It's same strategy, that I'm following, and all really all of our friends are following. But the issue is, right, without practicing politics, without being in the nitty gritty, right? The Machiavellianism, as you call it, Gabe, right? There's nothing that's going to stop them from depositing 10,000 Bomalians in Moscow or 200,000 in the state of Idaho, right? Right. They take power, and all of our designs, our long-term plans of what we want to do, are for naught if we don't engage in the political in this way. They take power, and they can outnumber us like that, right? It takes us 20, 40, 60, 80 years to have those numbers. They can have them overnight.
Right, but your tax structure will incentivize the Muslim family with 5 wives and 50 kids.
Yeah, not if JD Vance and Donald Trump become president and kick them all out. And he has to use that carrot to get elected, right?
But they're becoming American
that's what I'm
citizens. That's what they've done in Dearborn, Michigan. That's what they've done in Minnesota. They're becoming citizens.
That could be revoked, right? And it's going to have to be. I mean, like seriously, on like even on like that issue, we have to get much more hardcore about immigration, about naturalization, right? We have. I mean, yeah, Ilhan Omar needs to have her citizenship revoked and be sent back, right? That has to happen. And same thing with Dearborn, Michigan. Like they got to go back, right? They're not Americans. They're never going to be Americans. They have to go back to home. And like that I mean, I think that is the central pivotal issue is immigration, because this is how they get power. And right, without our side doing the things they need to acquire power to both, A, prevent that, and B, roll it back, send these people home. Right. The plans that we have, we're not going to succeed in them. Right. It doesn't matter how many kids we have, how many kids we disciple, raise to be faithful. Right. They're just going to bring more of them here, and we have to win. Right. That is the big E on the R chart is winning. We have to win, and we have to preserve our nation. And if it means, right, we have to have tax credits, then cool, right? Because like a tax credit, that the whole tax system and all those, that could be changed and shifted and fixed easily when you have power, right? But you have to have power first. So that's my closing statement.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I know we could have kept going back and forth, but we're about to lose Gabe entirely to the night. So yeah, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it there. Thank you all so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Gabe, where can people go to follow you and keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter, GM Rench, and then you can go to my website, GabeRench.com. That kind of takes you to everything, crosspolitic.com, all the other stuff I got going on. And, of course, follow us. Come to our conference. We've got a prodigalamerica.com is our conference in October in Fort Worth, Texas, just days before the election.
What are the dates on that?
That's October 31st to November 2nd. So it's literally like the election is November 4th or 5th. And the whole goal of that conference is to call America back to repentance. Does America even want to be, America's that prodigal son, and do they even want to return in repentance to the Father? And so that's kind of the theme of the conference.
Awesome. Andrew, what about you?
You can follow me at Boniface Option on Twitter and on Gab. The podcast is Contra Mundum.
It should have been Make Boniface Great Again. That should have been the title of your podcast.
No, I like our title. I like it. Yeah. Contra Mundum's good. But that CJ Engel and I do that every week. And soon we'll get to do it together in person, and we'll do it a couple times a week. And so, and then maybe we'll get to join you too, Connor. I don't know. Hopefully I'm not doxing your location. Is that known on your podcast?
It's real exclusive. Somewhere
he's in Ohio,
Nashville, and also in Seattle, Washington, simultaneously. So.
Yeah, so drive down from Seattle to where we'll be. But no, you can find us there. It's ContraMundumPodcast.com is the website as well. So it's a long thing, but I think everyone's smart enough to be able to spell that. So check us out there. And thank you so much for doing this. Thanks, Gabe. It was fun having a little party with whiskey and beer here with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Feel free to check out our Substack, Forge and Anvil.substack.com. I would appreciate it. And of course, share this does help a lot. Really appreciate it. Sorry, chat, that we didn't get to too much, but we had a lot to talk about. So we appreciate you joining, and we'll hope you join us next week when we go live again. But until then, we'll see you next time.